You have been told your entire life that dying is the end of experience. It isn't, not immediately. For roughly 30 seconds, your brain does something it has never done before, not once, in your entire life, and some scientists now think you may be more electrically active in that window than you have been in years. In 2022, an 87-year-old man was hooked up to an EEG machine in a hospital, being monitored for seizures. Nobody expected what happened next. In the middle of the recording, he had a sudden cardiac arrest and died. And because the machine never stopped running, doctors ended up with something that had never existed before. A complete electrical recording of a human brain in the exact moment of death. A neuroscientist named Raul Vicente, along with a team including neurosurgeon Ajmal Zemar, sat down to analyze it. What they found didn't look like a brain shutting off. It looked like a brain doing something it had never done before. Here's what most people assume about dying. The lights go out. Activity fades. The brain slows down, flickers, and stops, like a phone battery draining to zero. That assumption is not what the data shows. In the roughly 30 seconds surrounding this man's death, his brain produced a surge in gamma waves, the fastest, most energetic electrical oscillations the brain can generate. Not a decline, a surge. To understand why that matters, you need to know what gamma waves actually do. Gamma waves are consistently linked to conscious experience. They show up when you're focused, when you're recalling a memory, when your brain is actively binding information together into a single coherent thought. They are not the waves of a brain switching off. They are the waves of a brain doing something. And it wasn't happening everywhere at random. The activity concentrated in a specific region called the temporoparietal junction, the area where the temporal and parietal lobes meet, tucked behind the ear. This isn't an obscure corner of the brain. It's a region already known for something specific. It activates during out-of-body experiences and during dreaming. The exact zone linked to feeling like you've left your body, lighting up in the final seconds of a human life. Here's where it gets stranger. This wasn't the first time scientists had seen this pattern. Back in 2013, a researcher named Jimo Borjigan ran a study on rats, measuring their brains as they died of cardiac arrest. She found the exact same thing. A burst of gamma waves in the roughly 30 seconds after the heart stopped. Two different species, two different labs, a decade apart. The same 30-second window. The same electrical signature. But scientists don't like getting excited too early, and neither should you. When other researchers looked closely at the human case, they found something more complicated. The EEG didn't actually show an increase in the total amount of gamma activity after the heart stopped. Overall brain activity was still declining. What increased was the relative amount of gamma, compared to the other slower brainwaves happening at the same time. In other words, gamma wasn't necessarily getting louder. Everything else was going quiet around it, and gamma was simply what was left standing. There's also the complication that this was one patient, and not a healthy one. He'd suffered a traumatic brain injury before this recording even began, along with dangerous seizures. He'd been given anesthesia, anti-seizure medication, and other drugs, any of which could have shaped what his brain was doing electrically, independent of the dying process itself. Even the researchers who ran the study were careful to say this. One case is a data point, not a proof. So scientists went looking for confirmation somewhere it would actually count. Not in a single unplanned recording, but in a deliberate one. A separate research team studied 4 patients who were dying under a very different, much more controlled set of circumstances, after their ventilators were withdrawn at the end of life. In 2 of those 4 patients, the same thing showed up. A surge of gamma activity concentrated in that same region behind the ear, and connected all the way across the brain to the front. 2 studies, different countries, different circumstances, different scientists. And the same signature kept appearing in that same 30-second window, in that same part of the brain. Nobody is claiming this proves what people experience when they die. Nobody can. A brainwave pattern isn't a transcript of an inner experience. It's a shadow of one, and shadows can be misleading. But here's the question the researchers themselves have started asking out loud. Gamma activity syncing up with slower brainwaves like this is something we normally see during memory recall in people who are very much alive. So could this final burst be the brain pulling up everything it has, all at once? Something the researchers cautiously called a last recall of life. Nobody knows for certain, but sit with what that would mean if it's even partly true. For your entire life, you have organized your fear around a single image. A line. One side is being here. The other side is nothing. But that line may not be as clean as you think. There may be a threshold, not a wall, a stretch of time where the brain is still working, still binding pieces of experience together, even as the body that carries it is already gone. And here's what's strange. Long before anyone had an EEG machine, entire cultures already seemed to sense that something was happening in this window, and they built their traditions around it. In Rwanda, the Kirinda people traditionally treat death as 3 separate phases, and the first one isn't burial or even mourning. It's called attending to the dying soul, a period where the focus is entirely on the person as they are still passing, not yet gone. In many Native American traditions, death was never described as an ending at all. The word used wasn't passed away. It was walked on, a phrase that assumes the person is still in motion, still going somewhere, even as their body stops. Across cultures with almost no contact with each other, separated by oceans and thousands of years, people kept arriving at the same intuition. That the moment of death is not a single instant but a passage, something with a beginning and an end, something a person moves through rather than simply hits. Nobody had a machine to prove that intuition. They just kept noticing it, generation after generation, and building rituals around a threshold nobody could see. Now we have a machine. And in the one window scientists have actually managed to record, the brain wasn't quiet. It was doing the one thing it does when it's trying to hold on to something. It was firing in the pattern of a mind remembering, sinking, reaching. For 300,000 years, every human who has ever died has passed through this exact 30-second window, and until 2022, not one of us had ever seen what happens inside it. Now we have. And what we found wasn't silence.